You're not invited. Olivia wants something more contemporary. That's how my son told me not to come to my own granddaughter's birthday. Not even a sorry tone in his voice. Just the same clipped efficiency he used when arranging plumbing or setting dentist appointments. I stood there, holding the present I'd wrapped in soft blue paper, her favorite color, or so I thought, and nodded like I understood. Like I hadn't been planning all week which dress to wear. Like I hadn't baked her favorite raspberry cake just in case they forgot to order dessert. They didn't even try to lie. That was the cruelest part. I suppose, in a way, I should be glad for that. They used to fake warmth, stretch thin smiles over tired eyes, make room for me at the end of the table. A paper napkin instead of a cloth one. A chair that wobbled. No one ever asked me to speak, but I was allowed to sit. That was the arrangement. Until this year. I didn't say anything to my son. I didn't cry. Just set the gift down on the hallway table and walked home slowly, one aching foot in front of the other. It was a bright morning, one of those crisp fall days where even the shadows look clean. My little cottage looked warmer than usual when I turned the key, like it knew I'd be returning early. I hung up my coat, washed my hands, put the cake in the fridge. I didn't eat any. I wasn't hungry. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, listening to the silence. There's a kind of stillness that only old houses know, like they're holding their breath with you. This wasn't new, the slow erasure. Over the years, I had learned to make myself smaller, to say I understand when I didn't, to stay home when my knees ached so they wouldn't have to worry about helping me up the stairs. I gave them space. I gave them money. I gave them my time. And they took it all, like children take from trees, assuming there'd always be more. But trees don't complain when you strip them bare. They just stop blooming. I looked at the clock. 5:15. The party would be starting soon. Olivia would be stepping into the room, surrounded by helium balloons and gold cutlery, maybe even one of those hired photographers who made everything look like a magazine shoot. She'd be smiling, not thinking of the woman who once sat up with her all night after she got her first heartbreak, or the one who taught her how to bake cookies from scratch, or the one who sewed her Halloween costume because her mother didn't have the time. I got up slowly and walked to the bedroom. The closet still smelled faintly of lavender and cedar. My hands found the navy blue blouse, the one with the pearl buttons. I hadn't worn it in years. Too formal for errands, too plain for church. But it felt right today. I brushed my hair back, pinned it neatly, touched the lightest bit of rouge to my cheeks. A strange calm was settling in me. Not anger, not even sorrow. Just clarity, like a thread being pulled free. I picked up the phone, dialed one number. A man's voice answered on the second ring. Mrs. Holloway, he said warmly. I was just thinking about you. I'd like a table, I said, for tonight. He paused. You want to dine in, ma'am? No, I said gently. I want to be seen. Silence again, then a low chuckle. Consider it done. I hung up the phone. Took a last glance at the cake in the fridge. Maybe I'd bring it with me. Maybe not. Some things belong to quiet kitchens. Others to rooms filled with noise and laughter, the kind where people clink glasses and forget their own cruelty. At 6:15, I locked the door behind me and walked out. The city was glowing with the kind of early evening light that makes everything feel possible. And for the first time in a very long while, I felt like I wasn't walking toward a memory, but toward something new. The first time I held my son, he fit in the crook of my elbow like he'd always belonged there. His name was Matthew, after his grandfather, but I used to call him Matty when no one was around. He had his father's eyes, dark and steady, and my hands, long fingers, gentle grip. From the start, I knew I'd raise him with everything I had. What I didn't know was how quickly everything would stop being enough. We had nothing back then, just a rented apartment above a hardware store and a baby with a hungry cry. My husband, Roy, worked construction when the jobs came through. I cleaned houses. We shared one pair of decent shoes between us for when we had to look presentable. We were poor, but not bitter. I remember laughing often, real laughter, belly deep and sore-throated. Then came the accident. Roy was working on a third-floor scaffolding when it gave out. He landed headfirst on concrete. I never got to say goodbye. He died while I was folding laundry at Mrs. Tremont's house. I remember because her iron was still hissing when I got the call. Maddie was 9 months old. And just like that, I became a woman alone with a baby and a funeral bill. I didn't cry long. I didn't have time. Bills don't wait for grief. I took on every job I could. Early mornings mopping offices. Late nights baking. I was always tired, but always proud. I told myself, you will give him a life better than this. And I did. By the time Maddie was 5, I'd started selling my pastries out of the back door to neighbors. By the time he was 10, I'd turned that into a tiny bakery. Sylvia's Sweets, with one display window and the smell of cinnamon always hanging in the air. I didn't take vacations. I didn't date. I poured everything into that shop and into him. When he got into university, the first in our family, I cried for the first time in years, not from sadness, from pride. I bought him a new suitcase and paid his first tuition bill without letting him see my bank balance afterward. He stopped calling as often once he left. I told myself it was normal, busy with studies, new friends, new city. When he met Rachel, his wife, he didn't bring her home for months, said she was adjusting. I met her at their engagement dinner, where she shook my hand like a polite stranger. Her nails were the kind that made typing look like a challenge. She wore perfume that made my throat itch. Still, I smiled. Gave them a down payment for their first condo. Paid for their honeymoon. Later, when Olivia was born, I watched her in the afternoons so Rachel could get her body back with yoga. I didn't mind. Holding Olivia brought back something I thought I'd lost. But the gap widened. Slowly, subtly. Holidays turned into quick drop-ins. Birthday dinners moved from my house to restaurants I couldn't afford. The bakery became that little hobby I ran. I noticed Rachel's lips tighten when I brought my own Tupperware to their potlucks, always with leftovers. Olivia started calling me Grams instead of Grandma. Said it sounded trendier. I let it go. I let a lot of things go. Like the time I overheard Matthew telling a friend, "She means well, but she's kind of stuck in the past." Or when Rachel accidentally forgot to include me in the family photo calendar 3 years in a row. Or when they told Olivia that her great-aunt's diamond earrings came from Rachel's side of the family. They were mine. I kept telling myself it wasn't worth the fight, that they didn't mean harm, that love shows itself in different ways. But love, I've learned, does not forget your name on a guest list. Love does not leave your chair empty. On the morning of Olivia's 16th birthday, I baked all night. Raspberry velvet cake with white chocolate curls. Her favorite since she was 6. I wrapped the present, a locket with her baby picture inside, and pressed the dress I'd saved for the occasion. Then Matthew's voice came over the phone, clipped, emotionless. "You're not invited. Olivia wants something more contemporary. No apology, no regret, just exclusion, presented like a fact." I should have cried, should have screamed. But something colder settled in me that morning. Not hate, not even hurt. Clarity. They had made a decision, and now it was time for me to make one too. The last time I saw Roy alive, he was standing in the kitchen in his undershirt, slicing an apple with his pocket knife. He always peeled them in a single long spiral, never once breaking the strip. I remember thinking how calm he looked that morning, how certain. He kissed me on the cheek, said, "Don't let the world make you smaller than you are, Sil, even when it tries." Then he went to work. The call came 3 hours later. Since then, I've done everything myself, raised our boy, paid our debts, grew something from nothing. But some part of me, maybe the part that watched Roy walk out that door for the last time, never truly healed. It only hardened. And that hardness, I think, made it easy for people to forget I had feelings at all. Matthew forgot. Rachel never even tried to see them. And Olivia? I don't know. Maybe she was too young to understand that I wasn't just the woman who picked her up from school, bought her ice cream, and quietly disappeared when the adults came home. I was the reason they could afford those adult lives at all. But you don't get credit for things like that, not if you do them quietly. The funny thing is, I never wanted applause. I wanted family. Real family. The kind that remembers your birthday without a Facebook reminder. The kind that shows up with soup when you're sick. The kind that saves you a seat without needing to ask. Instead, I got a message. Stay home. But I didn't. Not this time. After I hung up the phone and confirmed my reservation, I stood in the middle of the living room, unsure what to do next. It had been years since I went out in the evening for anything other than groceries. But I remembered a dress, one I'd kept all these years. Dark green silk with tiny buttons down the side. Roy bought it for our anniversary in '89. I hadn't worn it in over a decade. It still fit. I pressed it carefully, smoothing the fabric with hands that had folded 1,000 pie crusts. I found the pearl earrings I almost gave to Olivia last year, but held back. I slipped them on instead. In the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in years. Not Grams, not Mom, not the woman who runs the bakery. Just Sylvia. By 6:40, I was stepping into a car that pulled up in front of my house. Not a cab, not a rideshare. A dark sedan from the restaurant itself, because I wasn't just going as a guest. I was the owner. I'd met Luca, the restaurant's chef and managing partner, 12 years ago when he was just a kid working the early shift at my bakery. He came from Naples, cooked like a magician, and spoke like he had something to prove. I fed him, paid him in small bills, and when he asked me if I'd help back a tiny restaurant idea one day, I said yes. I invested the seed money, didn't tell anyone, let him take the spotlight. And when he offered me a percentage of ownership in return, I told him to keep my name off the front, but make sure I always had a seat. Tonight, I was ready to take it. The restaurant was lit with warm yellow light, elegant but not stuffy. The kind of place where the salt comes in tiny glass bowls and the napkins feel like velvet. I stepped through the back entrance, where the kitchen staff stopped what they were doing to nod at me. "Signora Sylvia," one of the waiters said, bowing slightly. "Your table?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Is Luca here?" He appeared within moments, his apron still dusted with flour. "Madonna mia," he said, grinning. "You look like a queen." "I feel like one," I replied. "But I'm not here to dine. I'm here to watch." He raised one brow. "Ah, the birthday party. You knew?" "I always check our reservations," he said. "Your son booked 2 weeks ago. Private room, cake and all. No mention of you, of course." "I'm not surprised." "I am," Luca said quietly. "You deserved better." I nodded. "That's why I'm here." He didn't ask questions. He simply led me to a private alcove that overlooked the main dining area, separated by a pane of smoked glass, invisible to those on the other side. And there they were. Rachel in her red dress, her laugh just a little too loud. Matthew in his tailored jacket, pouring wine for someone he probably wanted to impress. Olivia surrounded by friends, glowing in the candlelight, unaware that her grandmother stood just feet away. The table sparkled with flowers, gold-rimmed plates, glasses catching the light. It was the kind of celebration people post online with hashtags like blessed and family first. And not one of them knew the woman who made it possible was right there, watching. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt ready. The first thing I noticed was the music. Soft jazz, brushed drums and warm horns, the kind that smooths out the edges of a room. It filled the restaurant like velvet. Luca always had good taste. That was one of the reasons I invested in him. That, and his obsession with lighting. "The mood is half the meal," he used to say, adjusting bulbs with those long, flour-dusted fingers. From my quiet alcove, I could see everything. The private room was separated from the main floor by a set of gold-framed doors and a velvet rope. Behind the glass, my family posed for photos. Olivia beamed in a cream dress that must have cost more than I spent on groceries last month. Rachel stood beside her, flawless as ever. Perfect blowout, high heels she could barely walk in, that narrow, satisfied smile she wore like a signature. Matthew looked tired, or maybe just hollow. It was hard to tell anymore. A young hostess approached the table with a small clipboard. I recognized the posture. She was checking the head count. I watched as Rachel leaned in, brows furrowing, then shrugged. No sign of me. No name missing, no space saved. I was a ghost in their celebration. Luca returned with 2 glasses of Prosecco. "I figured you might want something," he said, setting one in front of me. "I shouldn't," I replied, then took a sip anyway. Just one. "You know," he said, pulling up the chair across from me, "I still tell people the story of your lemon ricotta cake. You were the first person to show me what real food tastes like. Not fancy, not complicated, just honest." I smiled. That was Roy's favorite too. He paused, studying me. "You sure you're okay being here? Watching?" I nodded. "I need to see them. I need to see what they look like when I'm not in the room." We sat in silence for a moment, watching Rachel laugh too loudly at something Olivia's friend said. Matthew was texting under the table. The birthday girl twirled her hair, oblivious. "You know," I said, swirling the Prosecco, "I paid for Matthew's first apartment. Did I tell you that?" "No." "Down payment. Fully furnished. He was 24 and broke. Rachel said they needed a head start. I gave it to them. Then came the car, Olivia's school tuition, the wedding. Always one more thing. Always, just this once." Luca didn't interrupt. "I never minded the giving," I continued. "I just thought maybe one day they'd give something back. A dinner, a visit, a call, not money, just kindness." "Families forget," he said gently. "No," I said. sharper than I intended. They remember exactly what they want to, and what they choose to forget. Well, that's a choice too. Below us, the food began arriving. Antipasti on heavy platters, marinated artichokes, cured meats, mozzarella so fresh it glistened. Then came the pasta, truffle ravioli, handmade tagliatelle with slow braised beef. Luca had outdone himself. I wondered if they'd compliment the chef. Probably. Just not to his face. They never thanked the hands behind the scenes. Rachel snapped a picture of the table, holding her phone high, making sure no crumbs showed. Olivia leaned in for a selfie. I saw Matthew whisper something to his daughter, maybe a joke. And she laughed, that teenage kind of laugh that's more about volume than joy. A toast followed. Rachel stood, glass raised, voice like glass herself, cool, brittle, rehearsed. To Olivia, 16 years of beauty, brains, and brightness. We're so proud of you. Everyone clapped. Olivia flushed, pleased. Matthew added a few lines, stiff, vague, about hard work and bright futures. He didn't mention where she came from, who had held her as a baby, who had saved every macaroni necklace she ever made. That wasn't part of the story anymore. I think I'll walk through the kitchen, I said suddenly, setting my empty glass down. You mind? Of course not, Luca said, rising immediately. Let me take you. We moved through the back hallway, past the wine racks and staff lockers. The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary and something baking. Staff bustled, but when they saw me, several stopped to nod or smile. Buonasera, Signora Silvia, one of the sous chefs called. Evening, Marco, I replied, nodding back. It felt good to be seen, even just in a kitchen. Luca opened a small door that led into the hallway just outside the private room. We stepped into the corridor. Plush carpet, soft light, the hum of laughter beyond the doors. I'll leave you here, he said quietly. I nodded. Thank you, Luca. For everything. He hesitated, then leaned in, kissed my cheek, and disappeared into the kitchen. I stood alone for a moment, staring at the door to the room where my family celebrated my absence, and I placed my hand on the handle. I wasn't going in, not yet. I just wanted to feel the weight of the door, to remind myself that I could. The candles on Olivia's cake were still waiting to be lit when her friends began taking turns for photos. They'd rearranged the table to create space. The big round one I recognized immediately. Luca always said it seated 12 best, but 14 if you don't mind elbow wars. From the looks of it, they didn't mind. Rachel was holding court, of course. She always did. Hair perfect, lipstick immaculate, leaning in just slightly every time someone addressed her. I watched her pour herself another glass of wine, her laugh cutting across the room like something rehearsed for an audience. The other mothers at the table, acquaintances from school, I assumed, chuckled with her. But with that tightness, I knew too well. I'd heard it at fundraisers and wedding rehearsals. You're funny, but not too funny. You're welcome, but only just. Matthew was quieter, not sullen. He'd never show that, but distant. He was being social, pouring drinks, checking his watch now and then. But there was something in his shoulders I recognized, the weight of too much pretending. And Olivia? She looked radiant. Not because of the makeup or the dress, though both were tasteful and expensive. It was the kind of light only 16 can carry, untouched by years of accommodation, unbent by duty. Her laugh rang high and real as she opened presents, read cards out loud, let her friends take more pictures than cake. But even so, I could see it. That occasional glance toward the door. a flicker of something unsure. Not guilt, not quite, but a sense that someone was missing. The same flicker I'd seen last Christmas when I called and the phone rang unanswered. When she finally texted, it was 2 days later. "So sorry, Grams. Busy week." She'd been raised in a house where apologies were polished, not heartfelt. Where gratitude was expected from others, but rarely offered themselves. Where holidays were measured by floral centerpieces and filtered photos. And I had let it happen. I had allowed my own erasure, one polite shrug at a time. Now here I was, standing 10 feet away from the party I paid for. Not with money, but with years of late-night baking, missed vacations, forgotten birthdays of my own. Watching through a pane of glass like I was the help? I stepped closer, into the corridor leading to the private room. A waiter passed me carrying a tray of sparkling cider for the teens. Another followed with a small tower of chocolate truffles. The celebration was in full swing. Everything was flawless. They didn't need me. And yet, Olivia kept glancing at the door. I wondered what they told her. She's not feeling well. She had another appointment. She wanted to stay home. It was easier to fabricate than to explain truth. Truth was complicated. Truth involved legacy, loyalty, and the guilt that comes from knowing you left someone out who once tied your shoes. "Grams," she used to call me with a squeal, running into my arms with jelly on her chin and stickers all over her dress. "Tell me a story." She used to ask for the same one every time. How Roy and I met. How he used to bring me flowers in old spaghetti jars. How we danced in the living room in our socks. She thought it was magic. Now she scrolled through other people's love stories on her phone. Ones with hashtags and ring lights. The old stories weren't enough anymore. I was the past. This party was the future. I stayed in the shadows for a while longer, listening to the sounds of a room where I didn't exist. And then, without knowing why, I stepped closer to the door. One of the younger servers, Daniel, I think his name was, walked by and stopped short when he saw me. "Mrs. Holloway?" he asked, eyes wide. "Do you need anything?" I smiled, small and deliberate. "No, sweetheart. I have everything I need." He nodded and disappeared, visibly confused. A moment later, the music shifted. The lights dimmed. Rachel stood again, tapping her glass with a fork. The cake was coming out. Olivia's friends began clapping as 2 waiters carried it in, lit candles flickering. 16 flames, tall and elegant. "Make a wish," someone shouted. She closed her eyes. And in that flicker of silence, just one breath, one heartbeat, I wondered, would she wish for more friends, more freedom, or just maybe? For me? The applause returned. The cameras flashed. A perfect picture, frozen in time. And then, as if on cue, Olivia opened her eyes and saw me. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't gasp or cry out. That would have been too dramatic for Olivia, even at 16. Instead, she blinked slowly, as if unsure whether I was real or just another figure in the background of her carefully curated world. Then she looked down. Not away. Down. Like she'd just remembered something inconvenient she'd meant to do and forgot. No one else noticed. The guests were still clapping, reaching for their phones, adjusting the lighting for the perfect shot of the cake. Rachel was hovering near Olivia, whispering something in her ear, probably reminding her to smile, not to smudge her lip gloss. Matthew was laughing at something one of the other fathers said, or pretending to. I stood in the shadows, still, watching. I didn't need to step forward. Not yet. because Olivia had seen me, and that was enough to change the rhythm of the room. She didn't look up again, didn't search me out, but she stopped smiling as wide, her shoulders curled slightly inward, like a child being scolded in public. She knew, not just that I was there, but what it meant. She'd been told I wasn't coming. Or maybe she hadn't asked. Maybe she assumed I'd simply disappear like a coat left behind in a rush. Something old and unnecessary, warm but awkward. The kind of love you only miss when the heat's gone. I turned and walked slowly down the hall toward the manager's office. The heels of my shoes, low, comfortable, worn in, clicked quietly against the tile. Not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. When I entered, the lights were low, a soft amber glow bathing the oak desk and the sleek leather couch. Luca stood from his chair when he saw me. "Everything all right?" he asked. I nodded. "It is." He motioned to the small dressing area behind the curtain. "Still want to change?" I didn't answer with words, just stepped behind the curtain and slowly slipped out of the green silk dress. I'd brought something else in a garment bag. Not because I planned on a grand entrance, I didn't believe in scenes, but because tonight wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about reminding myself who I was. I chose a navy pantsuit, crisp, clean lines, simple jewelry. The kind of outfit that says, "I've been places you don't ask about and made choices you'll never understand." I pinned my hair back neatly, adjusted the collar, and looked in the mirror. Not soft, not bitter, just certain. When I stepped out, Luca looked me over and smiled slightly. "You look like a woman no one should underestimate," he said. "They did," I replied. "But not again." He reached into the drawer and handed me a slim envelope. "What's this?" "The invoice," he said. "Catering, music, floral design. You paid in full last week." I held it in my hands, ran my fingers across the weight of it. The total was there in bold black ink, nearly $10,000, for a party I wasn't supposed to attend. And yet, here I was. "Shall I walk you in?" Luca offered. I shook my head. "No," I said softly. "Let me go alone." He nodded once. "They won't forget it." "That's not the point." I stepped into the hallway again, this time walking toward the main dining floor. Not the private room. I passed tables of strangers clinking glasses, couples feeding each other bites of dessert. One elderly man rose from his seat to help his wife with her coat. She leaned on him. He steadied her. I watched them as I passed. There was still goodness in the world, and I deserved to stand in it. At the corner of the dining room was a table for one, near the window. Luca had reserved it just in case. A single place setting, a candle burning low, a linen napkin folded neatly on the plate. I sat down. And from where I sat, the private room was visible, just barely, a sliver of it through the glass. Enough to see the outline of Olivia blowing out her candles again for a photo retake. Enough to see Rachel posing beside her with a champagne flute raised just high enough to appear elegant. Enough to see Matthew laughing with someone who didn't know where he came from. But not enough to see me. Unless they were looking. And they weren't. The waitress came by. A kind young woman with wide eyes and nervous hands. She handed me a menu, and I smiled at her. "I'll have the short ribs," I said, "and a glass of red." "Of course, ma'am," she said, with a warm nod. I leaned back in the chair, watching the flame of the candle flicker gently, casting soft shadows on the tablecloth. I didn't need to make a scene. I didn't need to interrupt. Sometimes dignity is louder than a door slammed shut. and I was done standing in doorways. The first one to notice was Olivia. Again. It happened just as the waitstaff brought out the espresso martinis and dessert plates. Miniature tiramisus in crystal ramekins, topped with edible gold leaf. Rachel was too busy thanking the florist, loudly for the benefit of nearby ears, and Matthew was halfway through a conversation with someone from Olivia's school board. But the girl, in the middle of fake laughing at a friend's joke, glanced out across the restaurant. Her eyes met mine. This time, she didn't look away. I didn't wave, didn't smile. I simply raised my glass, not high, not grand. Just a quiet, measured gesture. A toast. She blinked. I couldn't read her expression from that distance, but I saw the movement of her lips, the barely perceptible whisper. Grams? One of her friends turned to see who she was looking at, but Olivia shook her head quickly and turned back to the table, trying to mask her sudden stiffness by adjusting her napkin. She whispered something to her mother. Rachel turned, squinting toward the main floor. And then, our eyes locked. There it was, the moment of recognition. Rachel's posture shifted like she'd been struck in the chest by a gust of wind. Her brows pinched, her lips parted. She turned back to Olivia sharply, asked something I couldn't hear. Olivia shrugged. Maybe she said she didn't know. Maybe she told the truth. I sipped my wine and didn't look away. Matthew was the last to notice. Rachel must have nudged him under the table because his eyes followed hers. And then, there it was. That pause, that split second of disbelief. Then the discomfort. Then, the shame. He stood up slowly. Rachel grabbed his wrist under the table, trying to stop him, but he shook her off and started walking toward me. I didn't move. He crossed the restaurant, weaving through tables of strangers, his steps too fast for dignity, too slow for anger. He looked like a man who'd been caught stealing from his own pocket. When he reached my table, he didn't speak at first. Just stood there, hands in his jacket, glancing at the empty seat across from me. "Sit," I said calmly. He did. "Mom," he began, voice low, forced into politeness. "What? What are you doing here?" I took another sip of wine. "Enjoying my dinner. He looked down. "You weren't on the guest list." I noticed. "I thought—" He stopped himself. "We thought you'd be more comfortable at home. You've said yourself that these kinds of events tire you out." I tilted my head. "Did I say that, Matthew? Or did you decide that for me?" He looked around, like he wanted to blame the ambiance, or the seating, or the noise. Anything but his own choices. "I didn't mean to," he tried. "You didn't mean to what?" I asked, softly but sharply. "Exclude me? Lie to me? Let my granddaughter blow out candles in a room I wasn't welcome in?" His jaw tightened. That same expression he used to make when he got caught sneaking cookies at 6. "You have to understand," he said. "Rachel, she—" "Stop." I raised one hand. "Don't make this about her. This was your daughter's birthday. Your family. Your choice." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't think you'd come." "I know," I said. I let the silence stretch between us. Let it sit. Heavy and still, like a coat he didn't want to wear. "I paid for it, you know," I added. "All of it. The catering, the decorations, even the party favors." He looked up, startled. "What?" "I paid Luca last week, quietly, like I've done so many things. For you, for Olivia." His face flushed. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him. "I wasn't invited." He exhaled sharply, leaned back in his chair. I saw the years on him then, not just the stress or the guilt, but the cracks in whatever story he'd been telling himself about me. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "Don't say anything," I replied. "Just think about this. Think about what it means when a mother has to come to her granddaughter's birthday through the front door of a restaurant she owns, and still isn't welcome." I folded my napkin slowly, placed it on the table. "I'm not angry," I added. "I'm done being angry. I just want you to know I see you now, all of you, as you are, and I'll never again pretend not to." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Go back," I said quietly. "Enjoy your party." And he did. But not before glancing back, one last time, at the mother who was no longer waiting for permission to be seen. I watched him walk away, not with the shoulders of a proud man, but with the stiff, hollow steps of someone who no longer believes his version of the story will hold. He didn't go straight back to the table. He lingered near the bar for a few moments, pretending to check his phone, pretending he had something urgent to do. I know that kind of pause. It's the pause of a man who's been spoken to clearly and has no idea what to do with the echo. Back at the party, Rachel had returned to her performance, smiling, gesturing, whispering into Olivia's ear like nothing had happened. But I saw the way her eyes darted toward me again and again, as if waiting for me to rise and come marching across the floor with some grand speech. She didn't know me very well after all these years. I don't scream. I don't interrupt. I don't beg. I remember. And I choose. For the next 20 minutes, I sat at my table and did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I thought about myself, not as a mother, not as a grandmother, not as a widow, not as the woman who remembers everyone's food allergies or keeps spare Band-Aids in her purse, but simply as Sylvia. Sylvia, who once loved to sketch in the margins of her recipe books. Sylvia, who danced in the bakery after locking up, humming old jazz standards and pretending the mop was Fred Astaire. Sylvia, who once dreamed of taking a train across the country and staying at every small-town inn just for the stories. Somewhere along the way, I folded all those pieces into other people's lives, and they didn't notice when I disappeared. But I did. That night, I remembered what it felt like to sit alone in a place of beauty, not because no one wanted me, but because I chose it. Because I deserved to be somewhere with linen napkins and real candles, and a server who looked me in the eye when she poured the wine. Because I still had breath in my lungs and thoughts in my head, and a spine that, while a little bent, was still mine. I wasn't lonely. I was free. At the far end of the room, Olivia stood from the table. The party was winding down. Laughter had dulled, the cake half-eaten. Her friends were starting to gather their coats, cheeks flushed from sugar and attention. She moved toward the restroom, but stopped by the bar instead. I saw her hesitate, then turn. She began walking toward me, not rushed, not nervous, just steady. The way I used to walk her to school on mornings when she forgot her homework and held my hand extra tight. She stopped at my table and said nothing at first. I let her. Her eyes, the ones she got from my side of the family, searched mine. "Why didn't you come in?" she finally asked. Her voice was soft, not ashamed, but not defiant either. "I wasn't invited," I said. She looked down at the floor. I didn't know. I believed her. That's the thing about birthdays, I added. Sometimes the people they leave out matter more than the ones they include. She nodded, slowly. "You looked really beautiful tonight, Grams." I smiled. So did you. There was a pause. She shifted her weight, uncertain. I didn't plan any of this, she said quickly. Mom wanted a statement party. Dad just went along with it. I just wanted cake and music. You got more than that. She glanced back toward the table. Yeah, I think I got too much. You'll learn, I said gently, what matters and what doesn't. She looked back at me then, with a kind of quiet ache I hadn't seen in her since she was small. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I knew that silence too, the one that comes when you realize you've crossed a line without knowing there was one there. I should get back, she whispered. They're probably waiting. I know, I said. But... She hesitated. Can I come see you? Like soon? Just me? I reached into my purse and handed her the small box I hadn't planned on giving tonight. Happy birthday, Olivia. She opened it. The locket. Inside, her baby photo on one side, and a note, handwritten on the other. You were always loved. Her fingers brushed the chain. She didn't cry, but her shoulders dropped, just a little. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. Just remember. She leaned in and hugged me, quickly, tightly, like the girl she used to be. And then she left. Back to the table. Back to the noise. But something had shifted. Not everything, but something. And sometimes, that's all you need. The room changed after Olivia walked back in. Not in volume. The music still played, plates still clinked, polite laughter still bounced off the walls like well-placed decor. But in energy, you can feel these things, even from a distance. Rachel looked up the moment Olivia returned to the table and saw the small box in her hand. She smiled, but it was tight around the corners. Then she glanced back toward me. This time, I didn't look away. Matthew sat stiffly beside them. His glass was full, untouched. He wasn't talking, not really listening either. He was just there. I'd known that posture since he was a boy. It always came after he did something he knew couldn't be undone. I stayed for another 10 minutes, just long enough for the party to begin its polite unraveling. Parents checking their watches, teens collecting phones, someone whispering about work in the morning. Olivia stood to hug her friends goodbye. She didn't smile in the photos this time. When I finally rose from my table, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, not vindicated, not vengeful, just whole. I thanked the waitress. Paid, even though I didn't need to. Luca had already told them to put it on the house. But I insisted. Let them all learn I wasn't just a ghost behind a glass window. I was a woman who earned her place, her voice, her dignity, and now her silence. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the city hummed gently around me. I didn't need a coat. The air felt like truth, sharp, honest, and exactly what it claimed to be. I didn't wait for a car. I walked, block after block, with my heels clicking on the pavement, one slow, certain step at a time. I passed storefronts I'd known for years. A florist that used to buy my pastries for their holiday events. A bookstore that carried my old recipe collection once, back when I thought being published would make me feel seen. I passed a street musician playing a mournful tune on a rusted saxophone and dropped a folded 20 into his case. He nodded without breaking rhythm. By the time I reached home, my legs ached, but my chest was light. I unlocked the door. The house smelled like lavender and lemon polish, Sunday's cleaning still lingering in the corners. I kicked off my shoes, hung up my bag, and walked into the kitchen. The cake I'd made that morning was still there. raspberry velvet, white chocolate curls, perfectly chilled. I took it out of the fridge and placed it on the counter. Not for them. For me. I sliced a piece, not thin, and served it on the good china, the plate with the gold trim I usually saved for company. Poured a cup of black tea. Sat at the table I'd polished every week for 30 years and hadn't once eaten at alone with pride. Until now. Halfway through the first bite, the phone rang. I knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. Matthew. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. Mom? His voice was tired. Yes. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't speak. I didn't think. I don't know what I thought. Silence. He tried again. Rachel said you wouldn't want to be there, that it would be too loud, too young. She decided for me, I said calmly. He exhaled. I let her. Yes, I said. There was a long pause. She was wrong, he added quietly. No, I replied. You were. That stopped him. I've done a lot for you, Matthew. More than you know. But tonight made something clear. I was doing it all hoping you'd one day see me. Not just as your mother, but as a woman. A human being. You never did. I do now, he said. Do you? I asked. Another pause. I want to. That's a start, I said. But wanting to isn't the same as choosing to. He sighed again. What happens now? Now, I said gently. I live my life. You're welcome to be part of it, but not the way you've been. I'm not a silent wallet. I'm not an afterthought. If you want a relationship with me, it will be one with respect. With boundaries. I understand. I hope so. He didn't hang up. Olivia wants to see you, he said after a while. She told me she's coming over this week. She's always welcome, I said. What about Rachel? He asked. I'm not discussing Rachel tonight. He didn't argue. We said goodbye. Not warmly, not coldly, just with quiet understanding. After the call ended, I finished my tea, wiped the plate clean, and put away the rest of the cake. Tomorrow I'd bring a few slices to the staff at the bakery, maybe save a piece for Olivia if she came. And if she didn't, I'd still have something sweet, and no one left to disappoint but myself. The knock came just after noon 2 days later. No call, no warning, just the soft rhythm of a teenage girl's knuckles on a screen door she hadn't used in over a year. I wiped my hands on a towel, stepped into the hallway, and there she was. Olivia. No makeup this time. Hair in a loose braid, an oversized hoodie that swallowed her frame. She looked small. Not physically. She'd always been tall like her father, but in spirit. Like someone who'd just realized the world wasn't as padded as she thought. I opened the door without a word. Hey, she said quietly. I stepped aside, let her in. She walked through the entryway slowly, eyes scanning the walls, the shelf of old framed photos, the basket of folded knitting I never quite finished. It smelled like cinnamon and furniture polish, the scent she used to call Grams's house smell. It's quieter than I remember, she said, almost to herself. You've been gone, I replied. She didn't argue. We went to the kitchen. I poured tea. She didn't ask for anything else. We sat across from each other at the old table, the one Roy built with his own hands, with that stubborn wobble he never quite fixed. I liked the cake, she said after a long silence. You didn't eat any. I did. Later, after the party. I took a slice home. It was in the fridge. I raised an eyebrow. I figured it was from you, she added. No one else bakes like that. I nodded. I wore the locket to school yesterday, she said, pulling it from under her sweatshirt. Somebody asked me who the baby was. I said it was me. Then they asked who wrote the note inside. I sipped my tea. And what did you say? I said, someone who actually meant it. Her voice cracked just a little on meant. I set my cup down. She blinked quickly and rubbed her hands on her jeans. They always say I should be grateful, she said. That I have so much. That I'm lucky. You are, I said gently. I know, but I think they mean grateful in a way that feels more like obedient. That surprised me. She looked up. Do you know what I mean? I do, I said. Very well. I think I forgot what it felt like to be around someone who doesn't want anything from me. I smiled softly. We all forget sometimes. I miss you, she said. I didn't go anywhere. But I did, she whispered. There it was, not guilt, not performance, just truth. Raw, awkward, and real. I wanted to impress them, she continued. Be what they wanted, polished, smart, like Mom, not nostalgic. Nostalgia isn't weakness, I said. I know that now. She paused. Grams, she said quietly. Will you teach me how to bake again? The words sat between us like a warm loaf straight from the oven. Imperfect, a little misshapen, but alive. Every Saturday, I said, if you want. I do. We were quiet after that. Comfortable, finally. Then, right when I thought the moment would rest, the back gate creaked. A voice called from the porch. Olivia, you ready? Rachel. Olivia winced just slightly. I looked at her. You don't have to rush. She stood slowly. She said she'd give me 10 minutes. Would you like me to walk you out? No, she said. I want her to wait. She went to the back door, opened it. Rachel stood by the car, phone in hand, one foot already tapping. She saw me through the glass. Her smile was instant. Hi, Sylvia, she said too brightly. Didn't know you were home? I live here, I said. Of course. Her smile tightened. Lovely party, wasn't it? It was, I said. For some. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. Olivia stepped between us. I'm coming, she said flatly. Just give me a sec. She turned back to me, reached into her hoodie pocket, and placed a small, folded note on the table. Don't read it now, she whispered. But it's real. Then she was gone. The screen door shut with a soft click. The car engine turned over. I watched them drive away, Rachel's voice already animated behind the windshield. I unfolded the note. 2 lines. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like. I want to learn. It wasn't an apology. It was a beginning. And I had more to teach than anyone ever asked to learn. The next time I saw Rachel, she was holding a bouquet of apology flowers. Roses, white and peach. Tasteful, expensive, predictable. I saw her through the frosted pane of my front door before she even rang the bell, standing stiff, like she wasn't sure whether to smile or brace for impact. I waited until the second chime before I opened it. Hi, Sylvia. Rachel. She extended the bouquet. These are for you. I didn't reach for them. Instead, I stepped aside. You can come in. She exhaled, relieved, and crossed the threshold like someone entering a courtroom, heels clicking too loudly on the hardwood. I watched her take in the living room, the photos, the knitted throw, the worn-in armchair that didn't match the rest of the furniture. She'd always made me feel like it was something I should be embarrassed about. My mismatched life, my clutter, my sentimentality. But today, I watched her squirm in it. I let her sit on the couch first. She smoothed her skirt, beige, tailored, and placed the bouquet gently on her lap, like she might still offer them if I changed my mind. I wanted to say, she began, and then stopped. Well, I've been thinking a lot. I waited. We didn't handle Olivia's birthday right. I didn't. You should have been there, obviously. I tilted my head. Obviously? She shifted. It wasn't meant to be personal. I just thought, maybe you'd be more comfortable at home. That's the second time someone's told me what I'd be more comfortable with, I said. She flushed, but kept her voice steady. It wasn't meant to hurt you. But it did, I replied. And not because I wasn't invited, because it was done without hesitation. That landed. Her fingers tightened slightly around the bouquet. Matthew said you paid for everything, she said, quieter now. I did. I wish you hadn't. I wish I hadn't too. That silence sat heavier than the last. I thought I was helping, she said eventually. I thought a big, polished party would make Olivia feel celebrated, that I was giving her something better. Then what? She blinked. What? You said better, I repeated. Better than what? Than cake in my kitchen? Than stories from a woman who raised her father alone while working 3 jobs? Than a life that wasn't perfect, but was never dishonest? Rachel opened her mouth, but I didn't stop. I know what you think of me, of my house, my clothes, my way of speaking. You never said it outright, but your eyes said it plenty. The way you moved my dishes around when you visited. The way you corrected Olivia when she called me Grandma instead of Grams. The way you told Matthew I should rest more when what you meant was fade more. Her hands were still now, completely. I am not angry anymore, Rachel, I said. But I am done. Done making space for people who pretend they don't see me unless they need something. Done shrinking myself so others can feel taller. She nodded, slowly. I think I was afraid of you. That surprised me. I mean, not like that, she added quickly. You don't apologize for being who you are. And I've spent most of my life apologizing. That was the first honest thing she'd said. I never knew how to be around women like you, she admitted. Women who didn't need approval, who had a backbone instead of a performance. I didn't always, I said quietly. It took me decades to grow it. And when I finally did, you made me feel like it was something to hide. She looked at the flowers. I didn't bring these to win you over. I know. I brought them because I don't know how else to begin. Then don't begin with flowers, I said. Begin with change. She nodded, then stood. I'll go. I didn't stop her. But just before she reached the door, I said, Rachel. She turned. Olivia has your strength, I said. But she has my memory. Her eyes flicked down. If you want her respect, really want it, you'll have to earn it. And that starts by respecting the people who came before you. She nodded once. Then she left, bouquet still in hand. I never asked her to return it, but I never invited her back. The first Saturday. Olivia came to bake. She arrived 15 minutes early and brought nothing but a notebook and a ponytail. No phone out, no makeup on, just flower dust curiosity and a girl-shaped echo of the child I once knew. We started with something simple, scones. She didn't argue, didn't try to change the recipe. She rolled up her sleeves and asked where the aprons were without even glancing at the time. That mattered, because years ago she'd sit on the counter swinging her legs, licking beaters, and telling me she'd never learn to bake because that's what grandmas do. And now here she was, 16, with 2 long limbs and the same freckles Roy had, measuring out butter cubes like it was a new language she was determined to speak fluently. Why cold butter? She asked, kneading gently like I showed her. So the dough stays flaky. Like people? I smiled. People don't flake. They just leave in slow motion. She nodded, like she understood. We worked in easy silence, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. When the scones went into the oven, she sat at the kitchen table and opened her notebook. I want to write down the recipes, she said. Not from the internet, from you. So I gave her the real ones, the kind with crossed-out measurements in the margins and asterisks that only I understood. She copied them carefully, handwriting neat and focused. After we tasted the first scone, she asked if she could come next Saturday. I said, of course. Then the Saturday after that, and the next. She started bringing her own apron, then her own music, then a tiny tin of tea, she said, reminded her of me. One morning, she told me she'd told her friends she was just busy, instead of lying to make baking sound cooler. I said, that's enough. We made cookies. We made quiches. We made a mess I didn't let her apologize for. One day, while she was whipping cream, she said, do you think I'm like Mom? I didn't answer right away. Sometimes I worry I will be, she added. Too polished, too distant. You won't be, I said, because you're already asking the question. She nodded, a little misty-eyed, but didn't cry. I didn't hug her. Not then. We just kept stirring. Later, when she washed the mixing bowl without being asked, I watched her quietly and realized I wasn't waiting anymore. For an apology, for redemption, for some grand acknowledgement of what had been lost. I already had what I needed. Not everything, but enough. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like teaching your granddaughter how to cut cold butter into flour without overworking the dough, and letting her figure out what it means later when life tries to press her into something too neat. One afternoon, she showed me the inside cover of her notebook. She'd written a title, Grams's Book of Truths. Below it, these aren't just recipes. They're reminders. I didn't ask what they reminded her of. She'd tell me when she was ready, and when she did, I'd be listening. It took Matthew 6 weeks to ask if he could come by. Not call, not dinner. Just stop in. Said he was in the neighborhood, like it hadn't been 20 years since this street was his daily world. Like he didn't still know the cracks in the sidewalk and the way the gate squeaks when you pull it too fast. I said yes. He brought a pie from the expensive bakery downtown. Lemon meringue, boxed with a ribbon like a polite offering. I didn't say it, but I smiled in a way that told him, I still make a better one, and you know it. We sat at the kitchen table, not across from each other, side by side. He looked thinner, not sick, just like someone who'd stopped pretending food could fill anything other than time. You look well, he said. I am. I meant it. I know. The silence after that wasn't awkward, just tired. Like both of us had carried too many unspoken things too far, and now they'd laid themselves down between us, winded. He glanced around the kitchen at the jars of spices still in their crooked row, at the tea towel draped over the cooling rack. Olivia says she comes every week. She does. She's happier. She's more herself. He nodded, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. I think I was afraid, he said. Of what? Of disappointing you. You did. He nodded again, didn't flinch, just sat with it. I think I thought, he continued, that if I gave you less space in our life, it would feel less like I owed you something. That's honest? And cruel. It's not the worst thing you've done, I said, sipping my tea. But it's the first time you've said something real. That matters. He looked down. I kept telling myself I was protecting Rachel, he said. That you didn't like her. That you judged her. I did, I said plainly. She made it easy. He let out a soft laugh, surprised. But she's your wife, I added. And I respected that. I stepped back. I stayed small. For you. I know. I won't again. He didn't try to talk me out of it. I was grateful for that. I keep thinking about that night, he said. The restaurant. Seeing you there. Sitting alone like that. I wasn't alone, I said. I was just finally with myself. He turned to me. You looked sure. I was. I think that scared me. You were raised by someone who survived too much to settle for being ignored, I said. You forgot that came with teeth. He didn't laugh this time. He just nodded. I'm sorry, he said. Not because I got caught. Not because Olivia saw. Just because I missed you. And I made it your job to fix it. It's not mine anymore, I said. I know. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I've been going through some things, old accounts, legal stuff. I realized something. I raised an eyebrow. He placed the paper in front of me. I want to sign over my share in the bakery, he said. It was always in your name, but after Dad died, I remember you added me on the papers when I turned 21. Said it would make things easier one day. I looked at the form. Notarized. Final. That was meant for inheritance, I said. I'm not waiting for you to die to do the right thing. I let out a slow breath. I don't need it back, I said. I do, he replied. I need to give it back. We sat like that for a while, the paper between us like a bridge. Not the solution, not redemption, but something close to understanding. He didn't stay long. He didn't ask to. When he stood, he looked around again, then at me. Is it okay if I come back sometime? You can always knock. And for the first time in a very long time, I saw my son. Not the man he tried to be, not the boy who forgot who raised him, but the person I remembered. The one with my hands. Roy's eyes. And maybe, finally, a piece of his own spine. He left without hugging me, but he didn't need to. Some things mend quietly. The morning I turned 76, I woke up before the sun and didn't feel like a ghost. That used to be my fear, that I'd reach some invisible line in age and fade like a photograph left in the sun. Still visible, but only if someone looked hard enough. Mostly they didn't, but that morning, the house felt full. Not loud, not crowded, just full. I didn't plan a party. I didn't remind anyone. I didn't post or hint or hope. I made my tea, toasted a slice of rye, and sat by the window as the light climbed across the kitchen wall. At 9 sharp, there was a knock. Olivia. She didn't say happy birthday right away, just handed me a small, lumpy package wrapped in brown paper and string. The kind of wrapping that meant she'd done it herself. Not last minute, not rushed. I opened it slowly. Inside was a small spiral notebook. On the cover, hand-lettered in black ink. Things Grams taught me that weren't recipes. I smiled. She blushed. I only got to 38 so far, she said. But I'm still adding. Read me one, I said. She flipped through, then chose without hesitation. Number 14, she said. Let people underestimate you. It makes your teeth sharper when you finally show them. I laughed. Loud and real. Smart girl, I said. Smart Grams, she replied. Later that day, Matthew came by with 2 coffees and no speech. He sat in the armchair, handed me a card, and let Olivia take the lead. He didn't ask if I forgave him. He didn't ask to start over. He just showed up. For once, that was enough. In the afternoon, Luca dropped by with a lemon cake and a bottle of something sweet. He said the staff at the restaurant still asked about the woman in the green dress. Said one of the waiters framed the napkin I left behind. I didn't need to hear that. But I liked it anyway. And Rachel? She sent a message. Not flowers, not a call. Just a message. I hope today is meaningful. Olivia made me read her notebook. Thank you for giving her what I couldn't. R. I didn't reply. Some messages aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to be noticed. That evening, Olivia and I sat on the porch with our tea. She was quiet. Not the brooding kind, just thoughtful. She'd started asking questions lately. Big ones. About Roy. About grief. About how you learn to keep going when you lose the person who made the world feel safe. Do you still miss him? She asked. Every day, I said. Even after all this time? Especially after. She nodded slowly, and I watched her carry the truth of that like a weight she didn't fear. That made me proud. We stayed on the porch until the sky blushed and the air cooled. She didn't reach for her phone once. And when she left, she hugged me like she meant it. Like I was someone solid. Someone staying. Somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting to be remembered. Not in a bitter way, not like someone giving up. More like someone finally realizing she's been standing in the center of her own life all along. Not on the porch, not behind the curtain, not at the far end of someone else's table. These days, the bakery runs just fine without me, but I still go in every Thursday morning. Not because I have to, but because flour still feels good between my fingers. Because I still like watching the dough rise. Because it's mine. Every so often, a customer will come in and ask if I'm the Sylvia. I tell them no, I'm just someone who bakes. And I mean it. Because that's who I am now. Not a story. Not a title. Not a symbol for anyone else's guilt or memory. Just someone who bakes. Olivia still comes most Saturdays. We don't always bake. Sometimes we just sit. Drink tea. Talk about everything and nothing. She's started writing her own recipes now, ones with names like Apology Pie and Grams's No-Nonsense Scones. She's got a sharp tongue and a tender heart, and I've stopped worrying about whether she'll forget where she came from. She won't. Matthew stops by too. Not often, but enough. He doesn't bring pie anymore, just himself. And sometimes that's better. Rachel? She stays in her own orbit. We nod when we cross paths, but we don't pretend. That too is a kind of peace. There are still hard days. Of course there are. Days when I wake up aching in places I never used to feel. Days when I hear a song and have to sit down because the memory it brings is too thick for standing. Days when I still wonder what Roy would say if he saw what our life turned into, what I turned into. But even then, even in the ache, I feel whole. Not perfect. Not healed in some dramatic Hollywood ending kind of way. Just whole. Because I faced what they gave me. Because I didn't shout, but I didn't stay silent. Because I taught someone younger how to hold her own story in her hands and say, "This is mine, and I'm not giving it away." That's the thing about dignity. You don't get it from others. You reclaim it, slice by slice. Word by word, choice by quiet, quiet choice. And if you've ever sat at someone else's table wondering why your name wasn't called. If you've ever been left off the list, silenced by politeness, reduced to background. If you've ever been told you wouldn't be comfortable when what they meant was, you make us uncomfortable, then hear this. You don't need to be invited to your own worth. You already belong in your story, in your space, in your life. So write your name on the cake. Open your own door. And don't wait for permission to be seen. If this story found something in you, if it made you pause, remember, or feel less alone, don't let it disappear. Save it. Share it. Tell someone else they're not invisible. And if you've been quiet too long, say one thing out loud today that matters, even if your voice shakes. Especially then.